down that side, and it's always an up, sort of great curve up this way. And that's what you score in rough terms. Then it goes to computers. Computers spread it round 30 on the bell curve, or whatever they call the thing, and you'll get a mark. And if you've got a mark of 30, you're in the middle, of course. And it's a ranking, it's not a mark, as they keep on telling me. I wish I understood all these things better, but all I can tell you is it's very depressing when we see the results and we see very few marks in the 40s. And when I was in my teaching time, I got a curt note from the head of curriculum saying, why was it that only one boy had managed to score 40 out of the top Latin set? And my answer back to him was, well, actually it was only one who hadn't. That led to a very unpleasant argument. I was basing my view on what had happened, of course, when you'd gone down Park Street and they added some more marks because they give you a markup. So in fact, only one boy in that set had not got more than 40 when they had done the algorithms which they give to a subject like Latin because they think you're intelligent. But that's what happens each year, and we hope it'll happen again for you this year. So if you get a mark of around 30, it gets marked up to something like about 44. And that is really great news, but I hope that's not actually why you've chosen to study the subject. I hope it's because you actually enjoy it. Because if you've done it for a markup, you may be one of that, or 15% of students who look around you. I don't know who you are, but 15% of you are going to score less than 50% for the exam. And I find that very depressing. I enjoy good performance, but I wished, and I said this last year, that somehow I could wave a magic wand and those at the bottom would actually get their act together. And you've actually got almost exactly 3 months till the exams on Monday the 20th of November. There's plenty of time to get things right. Now the first part of I always talk about the second part of the exam first, because the unseen is really the thing I'm meant to talk about. But just some brief things. 2A is simply content and context. And the average mark is usually about 11.5 out of 15. And it ought really to be about 14 out of 15. It ought to be a dead giveaway. Yes, there are going to be a couple of questions, obviously, that are going to ask you to try and place that passage in its context, so it may say what happens next. But it's really just factual knowledge, and most of you do pretty well on it. But even those who are weak ought, after studying Virgil for a semester, to be able to get some marks for that. At least 7 or 8 out of 15, I would have thought. Then we come to the techniques. And again, I think if you listen to what you've been told tonight, and you read my examiner's reports, which tell you how to go about answering those questions, particularly on the question of words, we do want you to think about vocabulary. Look at past examiners' reports. They're on the VCE website, easy to find, and you can be bored to tears by what I've said in previous years. But it'll apply, I should be writing the same sort of dribble about you people come November, or the end of November. I just promised I would say 1 or 2 things, and there is, I think, some argument about what's acceptable. When I set the exam, I can't go past that. That's September 2011. That is the list of structures of techniques that I'm allowed to examine. So a question I ask must expect an answer from this list. So if you've learned about euphemism, proteron, or pleonasms or anything else, you may have learnt about it. It may be good for your soul. But it's not an answer to a question which must be, my bosses tell me, an answer from those on the list. And they're shorter than the full list you get, for example, in the Oxford Grammar, which has got a list of about 40 of them at the back. So just make sure your answers come from the ones that you've been taught on the list. And there has been some argument about what we do with verse scansion. Now, those are the first four lines of book one, to begin with the poem, up at the top there. And that's the way I scan them. Now, if you read Raven, published by Bristol Classical Press, he would take a mark off for lines 2 and 4 because I've got short and he would say they're long. Then if you read two other books that I was looking at just to remind myself today, Hampton, and I forget who the other person is, he would say, actually, they give me the mark and say it's right. The rule that we go by when we are actually assessing at the end of the year is we don't want you to put X for that last syllable. That's wet. All right? Have a go. And we don't want you to put short and long, one above the other. That's wet. Make your minds up. Right? If you put short and it happens to end in NT, well then we're going to say that's a mistake, because if it ends in NT, the rules say it's got to be long. But there are doubtful syllables, as there are up there with wane it. Right? And wane it tells us, of course, it's the perfect, not the present, which is when it's short, right? And era. So I have to say that I tend to agree, and one of the books I was reading today says even a long marked syllable, so if US somehow becomes long when it's nominative singular, like amicus, us, nominative singular, it will still have been read as short, because the Roman was listening very carefully, and the length of syllables told him what case something was. So, as Andrew Turner's told you, if it's got a short A, it may be neuter plural, it may be nominative singular first declension. If it's a long A, it's likely to be first declension ablative. Now it helps with translation. But this book says, well, actually, the Roman was listening so carefully to the sound of words that even if we mark it on, scan it as long, it would have been read out as short, which is very confusing, isn't it? But please obey the basic rules, write it out like that. We get some people who write out the lines in very funny ways. You only have to show the main caesura, which I've shown up there. A caesura occurs in any foot where there is a break between two words. So in the first line, there's a caesura in the first foot, technically, because there's a break in the foot. But the one we want is the main one in the middle. That's all you've got to put on. But do show it. If you don't put a caesura, you're losing half a mark. Okay? And if you get the last syllable wrong with it, you're obviously wrong, you're losing half a mark. If it's in doubt, then we give you the benefit of the doubt. Right? Because we try to be very generous. Okay. So think about the techniques, think about scansion, and Andrew Turner is right. The more scansion you do, once the penny drops, it's a dead giveaway. And there are usually 4 generous marks out of 20 for scanning lines, if you scan the right line. But if it says question 14, scan line 16, there'll be 1 or 2 of you who will scan line 14 because it's question 14. Get the right line, write it out, scan it, and you've probably got yourself 4 out of 20. Well, that's a good start, isn't it? And then you can probably fudge a few more. Okay? But it all helps if you're down the bottom end and you're desperate to get half marks. With regard to 2C, the responses, I have to say that it's usually the part of the exam that disappoints me most. And that's because we have been getting away from it. You can guarantee that the paper will have at least 2 parts to that question, the last question. I don't think we're ever going to go back to a single one, because that just produced pre-loved essays. And I hear my fellow assessors, when we're doing our training meetings, you can hear them sigh as they get to it, and then they'll turn up and say, oh, another pre-loved essay. Well, your pre-loved essays probably are not addressing either the passage or the question that's been asked. Half of that last question, at least, depends on whether there are 2 or 3 parts. One part is going to direct you to make use of the passage. Right? And if you don't quote, you'll not get more than half mark. So if you say out of 10, the maximum, even if you wrote a sort of, honours thesis answer, 5 is the maximum you get out of 10 if you haven't quoted from the passage. And the instructions change the way it is in the actual question, because you keep on being told that it's not clear enough. I don't know, perhaps you don't go in with your eyes open. But I've always thought it was clear enough at the top when it says, you should quote Latin and it should be quoted in parentheses, and please don't write in English and Latin alternately. Got past that, luckily, but go with the Latin quoted that tells you, or tells the assessors that you actually understand that what you're saying in English is illustrated by these Latin words. Put those in brackets, not the other way around. It's an English response with Latin used as evidence in brackets. Right? So do that, and you can use, obviously, quoting the other part of the question. Not say you can't, but don't repeat what you've already said. The 2 questions are likely to be quite distinct. So then we come to the unseen. Average mark is usually somewhere around 26 out of 45. I actually think it'll be more. You've now got 3 months to sit down with passages of Latin from any author you like that are no more than 90 words long. Because I can't set passages longer than that. Or roughly that. It's got to be around that mark. It might be 92, but that is what I'm told to do. So get used to finding passages of 90 words, sitting down, get your dictionary out. Remember, you're allowed a dictionary, but before you use your dictionary, use this. Famous example I always quote is Simmers. Couldn't understand, and this is when there were not 287 wonderful candidates, but only about 65, 66. There were 2 of us assessing, and we were looking at the paper and couldn't understand why suddenly people were talking about monkey face. That was because they hadn't thought about the word at all here before they just looked up Simmers, and if you look in the little dictionary, you'll find Simmers monkey face, and simian monkey. But that is just stupidity. With unseens, you're going to have a lot of verbs. In the bit I've put into larger letters there are 6 verbs. And we can all look the meanings of the verbs up. That's the easy bit. The difficult bit is, what do we find out from the end bit of the verb? We find out person, number, tense, voice, and also we find out mood. All those things come to the last little bit. Right? So, interrogabat, here we can all look up interrog, that's easy. T, third singular. Right? Bambasbat, imperfect, active, indicative. So we go through those things, and that's all in the end bit. And simus, mus, very common verb ending, first person plural. So sim, first person singular. Oh yes, sim, sis, sim, the present subjunctive of sum, but it became monkey face. Right. So do your head first. Think about it. So work through. In the reading through time, you aren't allowed to write anything, but for a quarter of an hour, you can look up in your dictionary, and as far as you're allowed to use it then, and you're allowed to use it in the exam. You're allowed, as far as I know, to turn corners of pages over. Don't use anything to stop you doing that. You're not allowed to write anywhere or make any marks, because you're not allowed to pick up something to write with. But you put in the reading through time, any words you're not sure about, you can turn the page down, and that'll save you a bit of time to get onto that particular bit. I should also say, our exam, of course, has answer books. We had an occasion a couple of years ago where an invigilator failed to give out answer books, and people had to write on the paper, which caused great angst. You write not as you would in many of the exams that are produced, where there's a little bit, here's the question, here's the answer. I said, no, we can't do that, because if you'd had the unseen, you would have had the unseen at the top, and then you would have had sentence by sentence, and you'd have been turning the page over, going back to the whole thing. Would have made an absolute nonsense. I won that battle. I occasionally win battles with the VCE, and that was a very important one. So you get a blank answer book. You write on the right-hand page, you can write anything you like on the left-hand page. We're not going to look at that, right? That's rough work. Unless you run out of time, you put great circles round and put an arrow across to show you're putting it into your work. So you can do a rough translation of the unseen. You get people who do go through the unseen, cross it all out and do it again. That seems a terrible waste of time. Right? But get used to doing them in 50 minutes. Give yourselves 10 minutes with a piece of Latin in front of you to look up words, turn the pages down, and then begin your translation. In that 10 minutes, you probably worked out the first sentence. Now, I've been going on for years, and every exams report for years says use bracketing. And I wanted just to look at that particular large sentence there, which caused some problems last year. You've got to decide which is the main verb and which are subordinate verbs. And I've tried to show that by using the brackets and bracketing words that go together. You can bracket together, for example, or I put them in italics here. You can use italics to show prepositions and the nouns they go with. But if you had done the bracketing as I've shown it there, you would have ended up with subject, at, is, verb, noun potuit, takes an infinitive, indicare, object, nomen suem, militi, another word not taken up anywhere else, to the soldier. That would have given you the sense of what was going on. But so many students didn't bother with that. If you took that approach, it seemed to me that the whole of that sentence would have been so much easier to do. So I really urge you, when you're doing your unseens, until you're so good that you don't need to do this, and some of you get to that sort of stage. But if you're in doubt, you get stuck, try and bracket the words together and go together. It really does help. You really want them to be left with subject, verb, object, in simplest terms. And then you're fitting everything else in. And yes, it may be difficult because you're not necessarily going to put, as Latin does, the main verb at the end. I mean, it must have been very strange if they spoke in the way in which they wrote, because you're constantly waiting to know what the main verb is. You're hearing all this stuff going along. And, I can tell you there's a piece of Cicero in the Fifth Verine where the main verb and its object are separated by 54 words. So the Roman who's heard that the object is waiting through all these subordinate clauses and bits and pieces that Cicero's using, and suddenly we get to the main verb. Now, it's not quite as bad as that divided that would be more or less the whole unseen if you had Cicero like that. But that is the way to overcome difficulties. When you use your little dictionary, and I have to go through the little dictionary, it's in my bag that I should have brought it up with me, I'm constantly surprised by the way in which you will not take the advice of the dictionary. You just look up the first word, you're so panicky, oh, this must be the meaning. Well, and then there's a little thing saying mill, or a little thing saying legal, or VI. There are all these little abbreviations telling you it's a legal term, or it's a military term, which may be more appropriate. Or, of course, the meaning you want may be over the page, because the thing goes over onto the next page. Do use the dictionary wisely, is It's not just a simple thing of the first meaning that comes up in front of you. Sometimes even phrases that are in the unseen are given in the dictionary, and students ignore that and go for the first meaning, not reading through all the possible meanings. Now, it's not like Glaire's dictionary like this, where you've got pages and pages of meanings, which would take you the whole of the exam to go through probably. These are the dictionaries are fairly easy because it doesn't take long to read through. So do use your dictionary wisely. Practice. Use past examiners' reports. Practice with past exams. That may be a good way to go, but of course the virtual questions aren't necessarily going to be much help to you because they're on different books. We have had book 8 before. You can go back a few years and you find book 8 and you can see what was asked then. Whether that's still on the website, I'm not quite sure. But you can go and search. If not, I expect your teachers might be able to find places back at that time. That may give you some idea. It's a great book to read. Virgil is a great poet. Probably the most influential of the ancient poets on modern poetry, particularly. So I hope you will say when you get to the end of the year, to the end of the exam, well, that was worth it. It's been a slog. You are needing to use high order skills. Synthesis, analysis. Many of the other VCE subjects don't require those sorts of skills. And so their mean mark goes from 30 down to 28, something like that. Whereas in Latin it will go up from 30 perhaps to 44, if of course you're as good a cohort as the previous year. If you're not, well then you might get a mean going down to 30.
Oh shit.
That doesn't bear thinking about, does it?
No, that's fine.
Lined up.
No,
But it does have its rewards, but it does require hard work using the grey cell. 3 months to go, far down, so plenty of time to get it right. You enjoy the rest of your year. I look forward always to seeing in November what the rubbish is and what good things is written. I wish we could get better extended responses. I wish we could avoid some of the terrible mistakes we get by using the dictionary badly. I wish you all